My wife announced at our anniversary dinner, "I've been cheating for 2 years. I'm leaving you." I just smiled, toasted her new life, and watched her face drop when her sister walked into the restaurant. She leaned across the candlelit table, looked me dead in the eyes on our 15th anniversary, and told me she had been sleeping with another man for 2 years. 2 years. She said it the way someone might announce they were switching phone carriers. Calm, prepared, almost casual, like she had rehearsed every word in the mirror that morning. And maybe she had, because what came out of her mouth next was polished, deliberate, and designed to wound. "I'm leaving you, Declan. I've already made my decision. I just thought you deserved to hear it from me directly." The restaurant around us kept moving. Silverware clinked. Low jazz played from the speakers in the corner. A couple nearby laughed at something on a phone. Nobody around us had any idea that 15 years of marriage were being incinerated at Table 7 of Josephine, one of Nashville's finest restaurants on Rutledge Hill, the same place where Fiona and I had gone on our first real date. She had picked that place on purpose. I know that now. And here's the part that changed everything. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not grip the edge of the table and beg her to reconsider. I smiled. I picked up my glass of Bordeaux, held it across the table toward her, and said, "Then I wish you nothing but happiness, Fiona." The look on her face in that moment, the confusion, the crack in the composure she had spent weeks, maybe months building, is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. But what happened next, when the door to Josephine opened 40 minutes later, and someone walked through it that Fiona never expected to see, was when her entire world collapsed around her, and she had done it entirely to herself. My name is Declan Marsh. I'm 45 years old, and I have spent the better part of 2 decades working as a private investigator and security consultant in Nashville, Tennessee. I have helped corporations find stolen assets. I have helped attorneys build cases. I have helped people uncover truths they were both desperate to know and terrified to confirm. Professionally speaking, I am a man who finds things out. That is what makes what happened in my own marriage, in my own home, in my own life, something I still have to reckon with every single day. Because the man who spent his career seeing through other people's lies spent 15 years completely blind to his own wife's. If you are new here, take a second and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below telling me whether you saw this ending coming, because I promise you, you did not. And if this story hits somewhere familiar, hit that like button. It helps more people find us. Now let me tell you everything. Before I get into the details of what happened that night, I want to say something about the nature of working in my profession for as long as I have. When you are a private investigator for 20 years, you develop a very particular relationship with the truth. You learn that truth is rarely dramatic in the way people expect it to be. It usually does not arrive in one explosive moment of revelation. It accumulates. It arrives in small increments, in details that seem unimportant by themselves, but become devastating when placed together. A charge on a credit card, a different brand of soap in the guest bathroom, the way someone pauses before answering a simple question that should not require a pause at all. You learn to read patterns. You learn to hold observations without immediately assigning meaning to them, because meaning assigned too early distorts everything that follows. You learn patience that most people would find unsettling. And most importantly, you learn that people who are hiding something are always more visible than they believe themselves to be. I knew all of that. I had known it professionally for 2 decades, and it still happened to me. That is the thing I want you to hold on to as I tell this story. Not as a story about betrayal, though it is that. Not as a story about revenge, though some people have called it that and I have stopped correcting them. I want you to hold on to it as a story about the cost of choosing not to see something you already see on some level, because that is the real story. And it starts long before a restaurant on Rutledge Hill. I met Fiona Gallagher in the summer of 2008 at a charity event for Hands On Nashville, one of those volunteer coordination organizations that does real work in the city. I was there with a colleague. She was there with her sister Rosalind, who ran a small nonprofit out of East Nashville. Fiona was 30 at the time. She had dark red hair cut just below the jaw and green eyes that caught the light from across the room and made you feel irrationally like she was already in on something you had not figured out yet. She worked in pharmaceutical sales. She traveled frequently. She was brilliant at reading people. That last part I would later understand was not incidental. We dated for 14 months before I proposed at Centennial Park near the Parthenon replica on a Sunday morning when the park was almost empty. She said yes before I had finished the sentence. The wedding was at the Hermitage Hotel downtown. 64 guests. Her parents flew in from Knoxville. My brother Garrett drove down from Louisville with his kids. Rosalind gave a toast that made half the room cry. For the first decade, I can honestly say we were good. Not perfect. Nobody is perfect. But we were solid. We had a home in the Sylvan Park neighborhood, a 3-bedroom Craftsman on a tree-lined street where we knew our neighbors' names and had a standing Saturday morning routine at a coffee shop 2 blocks away. We never had children. That was a conversation we had early and revisited often, and ultimately, we agreed it was not the path for us. So we built a quieter life than most people expected, a more intentional one. It was full of long dinners, travel, and work that both of us cared about. I traveled for cases, sometimes often, for long stretches away from home, especially when corporate clients needed on-site security assessments in other cities. Fiona traveled for her pharmaceutical territory, which covered Tennessee, northern Georgia, and the western edge of Kentucky. We were both frequently gone, and we had both accepted that as the rhythm of our marriage. I think that rhythm is what made it so easy for her to hide. The first signs were small enough that I almost did not register them as signs at all. In the fall of 2 years ago, Fiona started coming home from her sales trips quieter than usual. Not sad, not withdrawn, just contained in a way that felt new, as if she were holding something close that she had not shared yet. I asked her once, maybe 3 weeks after I first noticed it, whether she was all right. She looked at me across our kitchen island and told me she was just tired. The quarter had been brutal. Management was pushing aggressive targets. She was covering for a colleague who had taken medical leave. All plausible, all true as I would later verify. But none of it was the real answer. I want to be honest about something. I am a private investigator. I notice things for a living. And I missed this entirely for 2 years. That fact lives inside me like a splinter I cannot fully get to. But I have sat with it long enough now to understand why. You do not run surveillance on the people you love, or rather, you should not have to. The skills I use professionally are tools I deploy on behalf of people who already suspect something is wrong. I never gave myself permission to suspect Fiona. I trusted her, and I believe that trust was not naive. It was chosen. It was the thing that made our marriage a marriage and not a monitored arrangement. But trust, as I learned, can be exploited by someone who knows exactly how much of it they have been given. The second sign came in January of the following year. I was reviewing our shared credit card statement, something I did monthly as a matter of financial habit, when I noticed 2 charges at a hotel in Murfreesboro, the Hilton Garden Inn on Old Fort Parkway, 2 nights in November. We had not taken a trip together in November. I remembered November clearly. I had been in Atlanta for a corporate security audit for most of that month. I almost asked Fiona about the charges. I had the question formed in my mind right on the tip of my tongue one morning over coffee. But then she got a call from a doctor's office about a prescription renewal, and the moment dissolved. I told myself there was probably a simple explanation. She worked in Murfreesboro. She stayed over sometimes for early morning appointments. I knew that. I had known that for years. So I put it away. I moved on. I did not go back. And that, I think, was the last moment when I still had the chance to change how this story ended. Our 15th anniversary fell on a Thursday in March. Fiona made the reservation herself at Josephine, which had been meaningful to us since that first real date. She even texted me the week before to confirm I had blocked the evening. She sent a little blue heart emoji, the way you do when you are happy or when you are so deep inside a performance that the gestures have become reflexive. I wore the charcoal suit she had bought me for my birthday 2 years earlier. I arrived 5 minutes early, ordered sparkling water, and waited. She arrived looking beautiful. She always looked beautiful. That has never been the question. We ordered. We talked about easy things. Her quarterly review, which had gone well, a case I had just wrapped up involving a missing business document situation for a media company over in Brentwood, She asked about my brother Garrett, and I asked about Rosalind, who had recently moved from East Nashville to a new apartment in Germantown. The food arrived. We ate. And then, somewhere between the main course and whatever was supposed to come after it, Fiona set down her fork, looked directly at me, and began. I need to tell you something. Declan, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. I remember the specific quality of the light in that moment. The way the candle on the table caught the gold in her earrings. The way the noise of the restaurant seemed to contract slightly. The way your hearing sharpens when your body knows something is coming before your mind has caught up. I've been seeing someone else, she said, for 2 years. I'm not going to pretend it was an accident or that I didn't know what I was doing. I made a choice. I kept making it. And I think we both deserve honesty about where things stand. She had a lot more prepared after that. Details she had decided to share. Details she had decided not to share. A version of our marriage that she offered as justification. We had grown apart. I was frequently absent. She had felt invisible. She had felt unheard. The story was coherent. It had probably taken her a long time to construct. I listened. I let her finish. I kept my face calm the way I have trained myself to keep my face calm in rooms where information is being delivered. Because the moment you react is the moment you stop learning. When she was done, she looked at me, waiting for the reaction she had prepared for. And I lifted my glass. Fiona, I said, thank you for telling me directly. I mean that. I wish you well. I genuinely do. She stared at me. That's it? What were you expecting? I don't know, she said. Not this. She looked almost frustrated. Aren't you going to ask who it is? No, I said. I don't think I need to. The confusion on her face was something I had not anticipated enjoying as much as I did. She had rehearsed reactions to grief, to anger, to pleading. She had no script for this. We sat in that suspension for a moment. She signaled for the check. I said I was going to have dessert. She looked at me again as if I were performing something she did not understand. And that was when the door to Josephine opened. I need to back up. Because the evening that happened at that restaurant did not begin at the restaurant. It began 6 weeks earlier in my office on Charlotte Avenue, where I finally allowed myself to look at something I should have looked at a long time ago. The credit card statement. Not from January, a more recent one. There was a charge for a hotel in Clarksville, 2 nights. Fiona had told me she was visiting a college friend that weekend. I remembered nodding. I remembered making my own plans with a former colleague instead. I sat at my desk for a long time after I noticed the charge, and then I did what I do. I started working. Within 4 days, I had a picture I could not unsee. The man's name was Bryce Calloway. He was 39 years old, divorced, and worked as a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical distribution company based out of Memphis, with regular business in Nashville and across Middle Tennessee. He and Fiona had likely met at an industry conference. Their paths crossed professionally, which meant she never had to construct elaborate stories. The legitimate framework of her work life had provided all the cover she needed. I found his profile through professional networks. I pulled additional records through my investigative tools. I could have hired someone else to document it further, but I chose not to. This was not a case. This was my marriage. And there is a line I believe in, even in my own life, between knowing what you need to know and building a dossier on your wife. What I knew was enough. I knew he existed. I knew roughly how long it had been going on. I knew that the version of herself Fiona had been building in private for 2 years was one in which I was no longer part of the architecture. And I knew one more thing. Through a contact at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, someone I had worked alongside on a white-collar case 2 years earlier, I learned that Bryce Calloway was currently the subject of a federal civil fraud investigation. His company had been billing false distribution contracts to hospital networks in 3 states. The FBI field office in Memphis had opened a formal case 8 months earlier. It was not yet public knowledge. Fiona, I was almost certain, had no idea. Now, here is where I have to be precise about what I did and what I chose not to do, because this story is not about revenge. I want to be clear about that. What I did because I needed to make one decision. whether to leave my marriage quietly or to let the evening that was already going to happen become something Fiona would carry with her long after it was over. I called Rosalind. Rosalind Gallagher Moore had been a constant in my life for 15 years. She and I had always been genuinely close. It was the kind of in-law relationship that is rare, built on actual affection and mutual respect rather than obligation. She texted me on my birthday without being reminded. She had called me twice during a particularly hard stretch of a case just to check in, because Fiona had mentioned I seemed burdened. When Fiona and I traveled, Rosalind was the one who watered the plants and brought in the mail without being asked. She is one of those people who anchors things, someone who holds the shape of a family or a friendship together, not through grand gestures, but through reliable presence and the kind of attention that makes people feel seen. I have known a few people like that in my life, and I have understood them to be rare. I met her for coffee at Barista Parlor on 8th Avenue 2 weeks before the anniversary dinner. I told her what I knew. I watched her face move through disbelief into anger and then into something sadder and more permanent. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough," I said. "I need you to know before it ends, and I need to ask you something." Rosalind knew about Bryce Calloway before I did. She had known for 6 months. Fiona had told her in confidence, believing that sisterhood would hold the secret. Rosalind had hated it. She had pushed back. She had urged Fiona to end it or tell me. She had threatened twice to say something herself and then back down because she did not want to be the one to detonate my life. When I told her about the federal investigation, she was quiet for a long time. "She doesn't know," I said. "No," Rosalind said. "She absolutely does not know." "I'm not going to use it against her," I said carefully. "But I think someone who loves her should tell her. And I think it should happen in a way that makes it clear what she walked away from to be with a man who is about to face serious federal consequences." When Rosalind asked, I told her about the anniversary dinner. I told her when and where. And I asked if she would come. She came. Back to table 7 at Josephine. The door opened at 8:47 in the evening. Rosalind walked in wearing a coat she had bought specifically for the occasion, or so she told me later, because she wanted to feel armored for it. She had called ahead and spoken with the hostess. She knew where we were sitting. When Fiona saw her sister approaching the table, she went still, in the way a person goes still when their brain cannot rapidly construct a framework for what is happening. "Rosalind," Fiona said, "what are you doing here?" Rosalind sat down in the empty chair at our table without being invited. She looked at me, and something passed between us that was calm, sad, and finished. Then she looked at her sister. "I love you, Fiona," she said. "You're my sister, and I love you. And I've spent 6 months keeping a secret that was slowly making me someone I don't want to be. Rosalind, don't. Bryce Calloway's company is under federal fraud investigation," Rosalind said. Fiona stopped breathing for a second. "The FBI," Rosalind continued. "Memphis field office. They opened a case 8 months ago. He's been billing false contracts across 3 states. It's not public yet, but it will be. And when it is, everyone connected to him will be looked at." The color left Fiona's face in stages. I watched it go. "He's not who you think he is," Rosalind said. "I've been trying to tell you to end it for months. I should have said this months ago. I should have said it out loud to both of you instead of trying to protect everyone from everything. I'm done protecting something that shouldn't be protected." Fiona turned to me. I do not know what she expected to find on my face. I kept it even. "Did you arrange this?" she asked. "I told your sister the truth," I said. "She made her own decision about what to do with it." "Declan." "You told me you're leaving," I said. "I'm not trying to stop you. I'm not trying to hurt you. But you should know what you're leaving for, Fiona. That's just fair." The restaurant moved around us. Jazz from the corner, silverware clinking. A couple nearby whose evening had nothing to do with ours. Fiona picked up her wine glass, then set it down again without drinking. She looked at her sister. She looked at me. Then she looked at the table, and she stayed that way for a long time. I want to describe the drive home from Josephine that night because it matters. I sat in my car in the parking structure on Rutledge Hill for about 20 minutes after leaving the restaurant. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I just sat in the dark and let the evening settle into me the way cold air settles into a room when a window has been left open all night. You do not feel it all at once. You feel it gradually. The temperature changes. The draft reaches you from farther and farther away until the whole room has shifted. 15 years is a long time. Even when you have known for 6 weeks that it is ending, even when you have done the work of preparing yourself intellectually for what is coming, the actual ending lands differently than the anticipation of it. Fiona had said what she said. Rosalind had said what she said. Bryce Calloway's name had been placed on the table between us like an object. And now I was sitting in a parking structure in downtown Nashville at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night, and my marriage was over. I thought about the craftsmen on the tree-lined street in Sylvan Park. I thought about the hydrangeas I had planted along the fence that spring, whether they would come in well, and who would be there to see them if they did. I thought about the coffee shop 2 blocks away, and the specific table by the window where Fiona and I had spent more Saturday mornings than I could count, reading different books, passing sections of the paper back and forth, saying very little. I thought about whether I had been happy there or whether I had simply been comfortable, and I wondered whether I had ever clearly understood the difference. Then I started the car and drove home. I made myself eat something because that is what you do. You make yourself do the practical things. You keep the machinery of living running because it gives you somewhere to put your hands while your mind figures out what comes next. There is a version of this story I could tell where I am the hero, the wronged husband who outmaneuvered the woman who betrayed him, the investigator who saw through the lie, the man who walked away from 15 years with his head up and his dignity intact. I do not entirely believe that version, because it leaves out what the months after that dinner actually looked like. The divorce was filed in April and finalized by October. Fiona hired an attorney, and so did I. The process was what it was. Thorough, exhausting, occasionally miserable, the way all endings of long things tend to be. We divided the house in Sylvan Park. I stayed in Nashville. She moved for a time to her parents' place in Knoxville and eventually settled in a rental in Midtown Nashville close to her office. Bryce Calloway's situation became public in June, 4 months after the anniversary dinner. The reporting was significant. His company entered a federal consent agreement. He personally faced civil charges and a period under court supervision, and his career in pharmaceutical distribution effectively ended. I do not know the current state of whatever Fiona and Bryce were to each other by that point. I do not ask. I know that Rosalind and I still talk, though not as frequently, and it is different now. She carries some guilt, and I carry some gratitude. Those two things do not always sit easily together. But she is a good person who was put in an impossible position, and I believe she made the best choices available to her, even if she made one of them 6 months late. My brother Garrett came down from Louisville in the spring and stayed for a long weekend. We drove out to the Natchez Trace Parkway and walked a section of trail near the Leapers Fork end. We talked about everything and nothing the way brothers do. He did not try to solve anything, he just showed up. That mattered more than he knows. The craftsman on the tree-lined street in Sylvan Park sold in July. I moved into an apartment in the Nations neighborhood closer to my office on Charlotte Avenue. It is on the 4th floor of a building where I can see the skyline to the east when I make coffee in the morning. It is quiet. It is mine. Some days that feels like freedom. Some days it just feels like quiet. I have had a lot of time to think about the question I get asked most when I tell this story. People want to know whether I was angry. Yes, I was angry. Not in the loud way, in the cold, slow way that settles into the walls of a person and takes years to come fully out. I was angry at the waste of it. Not just the betrayal itself, but the 2 years of pretending, the careful maintenance of an illusion, the energy she put into building a second life while walking through the rooms of the first one like nothing was wrong. I was angry that our home in Sylvan Park, a place I genuinely loved, became something I could no longer look at the same way. I was angry that the Hermitage Hotel where we got married is now just a building I drive past. I was angry that the coffee shop on the tree-lined street where we had a standing Saturday routine is a place I still avoid 2 years later because I am not ready for whatever I would feel walking through that door. Anger is allowed. I want to say that clearly for anyone who is living inside something similar right now. The composed exterior is not the measure of your recovery. You are allowed to be furious. You are allowed to grieve. Both things can be true. What I chose not to do, and this is the distinction I hold on to, was let the anger become the story. I could have used what I knew about Bryce Calloway to embarrass Fiona publicly. I could have arranged far more than a quiet dinner with her sister. I have the professional skills and the professional contacts to make a person's life extremely difficult if I decide to do so. I decided not to. Not because Fiona did not hurt me, she did, but because I know what I am, and I am not someone who destroys people for revenge. I am someone who uncovers truth and lets that truth do what truth does on its own. What I want you to take from this, if you are in a marriage with a crack running through it that you have not examined yet, or if you are already past that and sitting in the aftermath of something that dismantled your life, is this. The most dangerous form of self-deception is the kind that feels like loyalty. I told myself I trusted Fiona, and I did trust her. But I also told myself, when I saw that hotel charge in January, that there was probably a simple explanation. There was no simple explanation. There was a complicated one I was not ready to look at. I chose not to look because looking felt like a betrayal of the trust I had chosen to give. That is a mistake I understand now. Trusting someone is not the same as refusing to see them clearly. You can love a person and still be willing to look directly at them, at what they are actually doing, at the gap between who you believe them to be and who they are showing themselves to be. I spent 20 years teaching other people how to look clearly at the world around them. I had to get to 45 sitting at a table at Josephine on a Thursday in March to learn how to do it for myself. I am still learning. Some days, I think I am doing pretty well. Other days, I drive past the exit for Sylvan Park and feel the whole weight of 15 years sitting somewhere in my chest. Then I drive on, and I let it pass. That is the work. That is the only work that actually matters when everything else has been cleared away. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was back in my office on Charlotte Avenue, reviewing security protocols for a hotel group over in the Gulch, when I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered because that is one of the professional habits I cannot break. It was a woman named Patricia, a friend of Rosalind's as it turned out. She had heard enough of the story through Rosalind to want to ask me something. She was dealing with her own situation. A husband, a behavior pattern she could not explain, a feeling in her gut she had been dismissing for too long. She wanted to know whether it was wrong to look more closely at what was right in front of her. No, I said, it is not wrong. Looking clearly at your life is never wrong. We talked for 40 minutes. I did not charge her. I gave her the same framework I give anyone who sits across from me and says, I think something is happening that I can't see clearly yet. Start with what you know, not what you fear, not what you assume, not what you want to believe. What do you actually know? What are the facts in front of you? Then follow those facts, gently, honestly, without a conclusion already written, and be prepared for what you find. Because finding out the truth, even when it is painful, is always better than living inside a comfortable version of something that is not real. Patricia did look. She found what she suspected. Her marriage ended differently than mine, with more noise, more conflict, and children involved, which makes everything harder in ways I was spared. But she found out. She made her decisions with full information. And 6 months after that conversation, she emailed me to say she was okay. Not happy, not whole yet, but okay. Moving forward, knowing what she knew. That email meant more to me than most things that have happened in the last 2 years. I am 45 years old, living on the 4th floor of an apartment in the Nations, making coffee in the mornings with a view of the Nashville skyline. I do work I believe in. I have my brother. I have some friendships that survived the wreckage, and a few that turned out not to be friendships at all, which is its own kind of useful information. I do not know what Fiona's life looks like now. I have made a deliberate choice not to know. She is out there, somewhere in this city, building whatever comes next for her, and that is between her and her conscience, and whoever she has become since that Thursday evening in March. What I know is what happened at Table 7 at Josephine. I know that I raised a glass to a woman who had spent 2 years dismantling our marriage, piece by piece. And I meant it when I said I wished her happiness. Not because I was not furious. Not because I was not in pain. But because the alternative was to let bitterness be the last thing I gave her, and she had already taken enough. I raised the glass. I wished her well. And when the door opened and Rosalind walked through it, and the truth landed on that table between us, I did not engineer that moment as punishment. I engineered it as honesty. The one thing I should have been given 2 years earlier and was not. Some things you can control. Some things you leave to the truth. And the truth, in my experience, always does the work eventually. I will be honest with you. The part that stays with me is not what Fiona did. People make terrible choices. That is not new. What stays with me is the January morning when I saw that hotel charge and told myself there was probably a simple explanation. That is the moment, right there. We do not lose people all at once. We lose them in the small moments, when we decide we would rather be comfortable than clear. So if you are sitting somewhere right now with a feeling in your gut that you keep talking yourself out of, stop talking yourself out of it. You already know. You have known for a while. The question is whether you are ready to look.